Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Hetvi, and in today's video, as you guys have probably guessed from the video's title, I'll be discussing 5 techniques that can allow you to improve on your memorization for any study material. So I will go up in rank as to how I rate each of these techniques, discuss their use, their advantages, and of course their disadvantages. So with having said that, on number 5 is the blurting method. Now it's one that I feel many of us utilize when it comes to revising, which is memorizing and regurgitating what we have memorized. So essentially you memorize a passage or a particular information that you're interested in knowing and becoming familiar of. You write that out on a piece of paper and then you go back and revisit and understand what information you've missed and then incorporate that onto your piece of paper, and you repeat this cycle again and again until you're completely familiar of that information and that you can recall from the top of your head. Now, this technique no doubt can be extremely beneficial in the preliminary phases of your revision, or when you're understanding a particular concept, or coming to terms with knowing the key terminology or even formulas, for example, that you're wanting to memorize. This technique can be extremely useful for that. But the only limitation to this technique is that it limits the ability to then apply that knowledge, because you are simply memorizing and regurgitating. You're not really applying the knowledge. That is extremely important, especially for any examination that you're going to sit, or for any upcoming exams. What is going to be more beneficial is for you to then be able to apply the knowledge that you've memorized. Because, under time pressure, and I know that many of us are guilty of doing this, I know I have been guilty of doing this, is that when you're unable to understand a question or know what the correct answer is, we have this urge of writing out everything that we can recall about that topic or about that particular concept that can allow us to gain at least a few marks, if anything. So, whilst this technique can be extremely useful for kind of the preliminary understanding and ensuring that we're familiar with the content, it definitely is not something that I would use the more closer I'm getting to an exam, and that is why I've ranked it as the 5th technique among the 5 that I've chosen. On number 4 is flip learning. Now, flip learning is one that I feel all of us have acquired during the pandemic without us realizing. Now, this could be previewing lecture content, presentation slides, or reading journal articles prior to your class or lecture where you're taught this particular topic. So it's gaining that prerequisite knowledge, preview of that particular subject matter prior to actually being taught that in class. And this can be extremely beneficial in multiple ways. Number 1 being that it builds on your confidence, because once you're more familiar with the topic, when you walk into class, you're not going to be on edge, or you're not going to be lost or confused, whilst you're being taught that in class. Number 2, you're taking responsibility for your own learning, and you have the opportunity to work at your own pace and have the flexibility of choosing what resources you want to use. Because at the end of the day, know that we're all different learners, and different ways are more suitable for us to learn via. Some may be visual learners, so they learn by watching videos, animations, from diagrams, from tables and charts, right? Whilst others may gain more insight from journal articles, textbooks, and from examples that can allow them to see how that information can be applied to real life scenarios. So by doing independent study, you'll be able to form those connections with what you're taught in class and what you've learned on your own, building on your confidence of understanding that content. But of course, this comes at a price of doing it at your own time, at your own expense, which not many students might adhere to. And of course, this will depend on various different factors, like one's own interest, their motivation towards that subject matter, and of course the resources that they have available. On number 3 is the utilization of mnemonics. Now, this is one that I'm extremely fond of because it's relatively simple to use and it can make learning a lot more enjoyable because you aren't using the conventional forms in order to learn and memorize information. Mnemonics can be songs, poems, acronyms, and it's utilizing these to convert the basic information or the ordinary information to something that is much more easier for you to recall and memorize. So it's useful for storing information into either your short-term or long-term memory. So mnemonics is definitely something that I would recommend you utilize when it's something that you find difficult to understand or memorize. Mnemonics can definitely be very useful. And essentially this is echoing something that I mentioned in my previous video as well, where I was talking about productivity and motivations, is this gamification of what it is that you're learning will make it a lot more interesting and enjoyable for you. So if you haven't already, guys, be sure to watch that previous video, which I'll place a link to in the description box. But for this video, moving on to my top 2 techniques. So on number 2 is the lightness system, and the lightness system is essentially memorizing information over a period of time rather than cramming all the information in one sitting, which many of us no doubt are guilty of doing. Now, you may consider why many individuals emphasize on spaced repetition. I'm sure it's not the first time you're hearing the word spaced repetition, but it's important for you to understand that we as humans have the ability to learn and retain a lot of information, and understanding the human memory dates back to the late 1880s, where pioneering scientists have proposed that there are 2 variables that are extremely crucial for us to be able to recall and retain any information. Number 1, the reinforcement. So how many times has one been exposed to that particular information? And number 2, delay. When was the last time you had reviewed that information? So the more familiar you are, or the more you've been exposed to that particular information, the more delayed or the more latent that period will be where you'll have to then be re-exposed to that information again. So if you're familiar with a particular information, it will not be until a week's time or even 2 weeks' time until you'll have to be re-exposed to that information to make sure that you're able to recall that information again. And of course, the utilization of flashcards, which can either be the physical format or even the more modernized, electronic softwares that we have in place, like Quizlet or Anki, that can allow a lot more control and monetization over how often we are actually previewing those flashcards, has made it a lot easier for us to space our learning. Now, if you guys do want me to make a separate video on how to utilize Anki and how you could go about creating flashcards, then be sure to comment down below and I'll create a separate video for that. For this video, know that when you're creating flashcards, and it's one thing that I did want to get across, is make sure that the flashcards you're creating are very simple and they're very short and concise. Please do not feel that when you're creating flashcards, it's okay for you to write paragraphs and paragraphs worth of information. That is not what flashcards are for. Flashcards are for short, concise phrases, terminologies, even sentences. Maybe that's as far as I'd go, just a short, simple sentence that can allow you to trigger the recall of other information that you can then associate that phrase, that terminology, or that short sentence to. But flashcards should not encompass paragraphs and paragraphs worth of information. It'll simply become too difficult for you to first and foremost recall anyway and understand. And you'll have a lot of flashcards piled that you're going to have to try and memorize, again and again every single day. So rather than that, focus on key terminologies that you want to ensure that you can recall, which will then trigger subsequently more information that you can then associate that to. And my number 1 technique is the layman technique. Now, the layman technique was proposed by a Nobel Prize winner, Richard Layman, and essentially all it encompasses is being able to explain complicated concepts or terminologies in a simplistic manner. And there are 4 steps in doing that. Number 1 is to write down on a piece of paper what it is that you propose on getting across. So what topic is it that you're going to focus on that you want to explain to another individual? Write down all relevant information around that you can recall or that you want to explain, or ensure that you have incorporated within your explanation to make it more understandable for whoever it is that you're explaining it to. Number 2 is to then go and explain that information to that individual, which could be your friend, a family member, a co-peer, or even just a stranger that you're wanting to explain this information to. Number 3 is reflecting on your explanation. What were the advantages? What were the disadvantages? Were they able to understand all the information? Were they able to understand the key terminologies? Was your language simplistic enough for them to understand? And number 4, of course, is to then improve on those areas that you weren't able to fulfill in your explanation. That may be the utilization of difficult words or concepts that the individual couldn't understand. You might want to then simplify those and re-explain concepts. And I'd go as far as incorporating examples. Now, this can be extremely beneficial when you're explaining things to another individual, is that by incorporating examples, it becomes a lot more easier for them to then acquire that knowledge and, of course, then understand it, and even go as far as applying that knowledge elsewhere or explaining it to someone else via that example. Just by stating it in words, it's not going to help them understand or even memorize any of that information. But by providing examples, they'll be able to form that cross-link between that example and the information you're trying to get across, and make it a lot more easy for them to understand, and of course then be able to retain that information. So on that note, I'm going to end this video. Now, please do bear in mind that each individual is different and they have different learning strategies, and therefore no single approach or strategy is going to accommodate optimal learning for all. But no doubt the techniques that I've provided, you can incorporate 1 or 2, or if not all of them, to your current study routine in order to improve and enhance your memorization. And of course, your application of that knowledge as well, especially for the last 2 that I've mentioned. They can definitely help you solidify the information that you've learnt and apply it to any context that is provided before you. Be sure to try these techniques out, and make sure to comment down below, if you've tried any of these techniques out, if you'd rank these any other way, or whether there are other techniques that are out there that, I can help in improving one's memorization skills for a particular content that they're trying to study for. I'd love to know what other techniques are out there. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already to gain such content, and hit that bell icon to make sure that you're regularly updated with all my latest videos. And I'll see you in my next video. Take care. Bye!